In New York City, people disappear into apartment buildings every single day. They step inside elevators. They unlock their doors. They come home from work, from meetings, from building the lives they dreamed about. Most of them never imagined that the place they call home could become the place where their life ends. But in July of 2020, that is exactly what happened to a 33-year-old tech entrepreneur named Fahim Saleh. To Bangladesh, Fahim was connected to Pathao, one of the country's most recognized startup stories. To Nigeria, he was the founder of Gokada, a company built to change transportation in one of the busiest cities in the world. To the startup world, he was young, ambitious, successful, and still rising. From the outside, Fahim's life looked like the dream. A luxury apartment in Manhattan, companies across continents, a future that seemed wide open. But behind that success, there was a secret. Someone close to Fahim had been stealing from him. Not a stranger, not a random criminal, not a business rival waiting in the shadows. Someone he knew, someone he hired, someone who had access to his money, his schedule, and his private life. And when Fahim discovered the theft, he reportedly did something unexpected. He did not immediately destroy that person's life. He gave him a chance to pay the money back, a chance to make things right. But that second chance did not save Fahim. Instead, prosecutors would later say, it gave his killer a reason to make sure the truth never came out. On July 13, 2020, Fahim walked into his Manhattan apartment building. A masked man followed him into the elevator. The doors closed. The elevator went up. And moments later, Fahim came face to face with the betrayal he never saw coming. At first, investigators wondered if this was a professional hit. The scene looked too controlled, too calculated, too cold. But as detectives followed the money, the cameras, the purchases, and the lies, the case became even more disturbing. Because the killer was not hiding somewhere far away. He was already inside Fahim's circle. This is the story of Fahim Saleh, the young founder whose life was stolen by greed, fear, and betrayal. Before the crime, who was Fahim Saleh? Before the headlines, before the courtroom, and before the crime scene, Fahim Saleh was a builder. He was born into a Bangladeshi family and grew up in the United States. From a young age, he was drawn to technology, entrepreneurship, and the idea that one person with a laptop and a vision could build something that changed lives. Fahim was not satisfied with just having a job. He wanted to create. He wanted to solve problems. He wanted to build platforms that could work in places many investors ignored. That mindset took him across continents. In Bangladesh, Fahim became known through Pathao, a ride-sharing and delivery platform that helped transform how people thought about local startups. For many young people in Bangladesh, Pathao was more than an app. It was proof. Proof that a startup from Bangladesh could grow. Proof that local founders could think big. Proof that technology could change everyday life. But Fahim did not stop there. He looked at Nigeria, one of Africa's biggest markets, and saw another problem waiting for a solution. Lagos was crowded, fast, intense, and full of traffic. Millions of people needed faster ways to move through the city. So Fahim founded Gokada, a motorcycle ride-hailing company built around that problem. He was not just chasing money. He was chasing impact. He believed in emerging markets. He believed in young founders. He believed that big ideas could come from anywhere. By the time he was 33, Fahim had already built a reputation as a young entrepreneur with global ambition. He had companies. He had recognition. He had money. He had a luxury apartment in Manhattan's Lower East Side. But success can create a dangerous kind of visibility. It brings opportunity. It brings attention. And sometimes, it brings the wrong people close enough to do real damage. The man inside the circle. The man at the center of this case was Tyrese Devin Haspel. He was young. He was trusted. And he worked as Fahim Saleh's executive assistant. At first, that sounds ordinary. A busy tech founder needs help. Someone to manage tasks. Someone to handle logistics, someone to keep things organized. But an assistant can have a powerful kind of access. Access to schedules, access to private information, access to finances, Access to the parts of someone's life that most people never see. Haspel had that access, and according to prosecutors, he used it to steal. Not a few dollars, not a one-time mistake, not a small misunderstanding. Prosecutors said Haspel stole about $400,000 from Fahim. That number matters, but what matters even more is what it represents. It represents trust being broken, a founder trusting someone close to him, a boss giving an assistant responsibility, a young employee being allowed inside a private world, and then using that access for personal gain. But stolen money has a problem. The more you steal, the harder it is to hide. The secret gets bigger, the pressure gets heavier, the lies become harder to manage, and eventually, the truth starts to surface. That is exactly what happened. Fahim discovered that money was missing. And when he traced it back, the person behind it was someone he had trusted. The second chance. This is one of the most painful parts of the entire story. When Fahim discovered the theft, reports say he did not immediately go to the police. He did not destroy him publicly. Instead, Fahim gave him a chance to repay the money, a repayment plan, a chance to take responsibility before everything became worse. That detail changes the emotional weight of the case, because Fahim was not only betrayed by someone close to him, he was betrayed after showing mercy. He gave someone a chance to fix the damage, but prosecutors would later argue that Haspel did not see that chance as mercy. He saw Fahim as a threat to his secret, a threat to his lifestyle, a threat to the image he was trying to protect. And that is where greed turned into fear, because once Fahim knew the truth, Haspel's life could collapse, his job could be gone, his image could be ruined, his relationship could fall apart, and he could face prison. So instead of choosing responsibility, prosecutors said, Haspel chose violence. 5. The motive: money, fear, and exposure. Every true crime case has a question at the center of it. Why? Why would someone kill a man who gave him a job? Why would someone destroy the life of a person who had trusted him? Why would a young assistant turn on his own boss? In this case, prosecutors said the motive was clear: money, fear, and exposure. Haspel had allegedly stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars. Fahim knew, and that meant the secret was no longer safe. Once the theft was discovered, Haspel had only two real options. He could admit what he had done, repay the money, and face the consequences, or he could try to make the problem disappear. Prosecutors said he chose the second option. They argued that the murder was not random. It was not a robbery gone wrong. It was not a sudden fight between strangers. It was a calculated attempt to cover up financial theft, a crime committed to hide another crime. And that is what makes the case so disturbing, because Fahim's death was not caused by a stranger breaking into his life. It was caused by someone who had already been allowed in. 6. The planning before the murder. The case becomes even darker when you look at the planning. This was not presented as a moment that happened out of nowhere. Prosecutors described preparation, a disguise, a plan, a timeline, a way to get close to Fahim inside a secured building. Fahim lived in a luxury apartment building on Manhattan's Lower East Side. The elevator was key secured. That means people could not simply walk freely to his floor. So whoever wanted to attack him had to understand the building, the access, and the timing. According to prosecutors, Haspel studied Fahim's routine and prepared for the moment. Think about how chilling that is. A person you trusted is not just hiding a financial secret. He is studying your movements. He is waiting for the right day. He is planning how to enter the same elevator. He is preparing to turn your own building into a trap. That is the quiet horror of this case. There is no monster hiding in the dark. There is no fictional villain. There is just a trusted employee, a stolen fortune, and a plan built around fear. July 13, 2020. The elevator. Monday, July 13, 2020. Fahim Saleh returned to his Manhattan apartment building. It should have been an ordinary moment. A founder coming home, a familiar lobby, a private elevator, a place that should have felt safe. But surveillance footage would later become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. It showed Fahim entering the elevator. Then a man dressed in dark clothing followed him inside. The man was wearing a mask. At that moment, Fahim may not have known that this was the beginning of his final moments. The elevator doors closed. Inside were two people. One was Fahim, a son, a brother, a founder man still building his future. The other was someone accused of stealing from him. Someone who knew Fahim had discovered the truth. Someone prosecutors said had already made a deadly decision. The elevator went up. No crowd. No witness standing beside them. No one to interrupt what was about to happen. When the elevator reached Fahim's floor, the attack began. Authorities said Haspil used a taser to incapacitate Fahim before fatally attacking him. Fahim was killed inside the place where he should have been safe. Not in a dark alley, not on a dangerous street, not in a random part of the city, but inside his own luxury apartment building. And the person accused of doing it was not an outsider. It was his own assistant. The crime scene. After the murder, prosecutors said Haspil tried to cover up what he had done. This part of the case is one reason investigators initially wondered if they were dealing with something larger. The scene looked calculated. It looked controlled. It looked as if someone was trying to remove evidence. There were signs of a cleanup attempt. That is why the early theory felt almost like a professional hit. But the truth was much more personal. A professional killer might not have a direct financial trail back to the victim. A professional killer might not have stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from him. A professional killer might not have received a second chance and then panicked about exposure. As investigators looked deeper, the case shifted. It was not about a mysterious enemy from Fahim's business world. It was about betrayal from inside his trusted circle, the discovery that changed everything. The next day, July 14, 2020, Fahim's family became worried. He was not responding. Calls were unanswered. Messages were not being returned. For anyone with a close family member, that silence is terrifying. Eventually, Fahim's cousin went to check on him. What was found inside the apartment would shock the city. Police were called. The building became a crime scene, and investigators began putting together the timeline. That arrival may have changed everything, because prosecutors believed the cleanup had not been completed. The killer had been interrupted, and because of that, evidence remained. Surveillance footage remained, digital trails remained, purchase records remained, and detectives had enough to start following the path back to the person who had motive, access, and opportunity. The investigation moved quickly. Detectives looked at surveillance footage from the building. They examined financial records. They looked into purchases made before and after the murder. They investigated the people closest to Fahim. And soon, one name became impossible to ignore. Tyrese Haspil, the assistant, the person with access, the person connected to the missing money, the person who had a reason to fear exposure. Investigators found that Fahim had discovered the embezzlement. That explained the motive. Then the surveillance footage helped explain the opportunity. Then the purchase records helped explain the attempt to cover it up. Piece by piece, the story came together. This was not a random act. This was not a robbery. This was not a mysterious professional hit. It was a cover-up. A desperate attempt to hide a financial crime by committing something far worse. And in modern New York City, that kind of cover-up is hard to pull off. There are cameras, receipts, digital trails, building records, phones, cards, emails. Once investigators knew where to look, the case started closing in fast. The arrest. On July 17, 2020, just days after Fahim Saleh was killed, Tyrese Haspil was arrested. He was only 21 years old at the time of the murder. The arrest shocked people across multiple countries. In Bangladesh, people knew Fahim because of Pathao. In Nigeria, people knew him because of Gokada. In New York, the story became one of the most disturbing tech world murder cases in recent memory. The details sounded almost unreal. A young tech CEO, a luxury Manhattan apartment, A masked man in an elevator, a trusted assistant, a stolen fortune, a second chance, and a murder prosecutors said was designed to hide the truth. But for Fahim's family, this was not a headline. It was not a true crime mystery. It was a real loss. A son was gone. A brother was gone. A young founder with years of life ahead of him was gone. The courtroom battle. For years, the case moved through the legal system. Eventually, it reached trial. In court, prosecutors argued that the murder was planned, deliberate, and motivated by money. They said Haspel stole from Fahim. They said Fahim discovered the theft. They said Haspel feared the consequences. And they said he killed Fahim to prevent the truth from fully coming out. The prosecution pointed to planning, the disguise, the elevator, the taser, the purchases, the cleanup attempt, the stolen money. Their argument was simple. This was not a moment of confusion. This was not a random emotional explosion. This was a calculated crime. The defense took a different approach. They argued that Haspel was under extreme emotional disturbance. They claimed he was overwhelmed by fear, pressure, and the possibility of losing his girlfriend if his lies were exposed. The defense wanted the jury to see him not as a cold, calculated killer, but as someone emotionally unstable in the moment. But prosecutors pushed back. They argued that emotional disturbance did not explain the planning. It did not explain the disguise. It did not explain the purchases. It did not explain the attempt to cover up the crime. To them, the motive was not love. It was greed. It was fear. It was self-preservation. And the jury had to decide which version they believed. The verdict. On June 24, 2024, the jury reached its decision. Tyrese Haspel was found guilty. Guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of grand larceny, guilty of burglary, and guilty of other charges connected to the case. The jury rejected the defense argument that the crime should be reduced to a lesser charge. They accepted the prosecution's case that this was planned and deliberate. For Fahim's family, the verdict could never bring him back. But it did bring accountability. After years of waiting, the court confirmed what prosecutors had argued from the beginning. Fahim Saleh was killed by someone he had trusted, someone who stole from him, someone who feared exposure, someone who chose murder over responsibility. Sentencing, 40 years to life. On September 10, 2024, Tyrese Haspel was sentenced. The sentence was 40 years to life in state prison. That means he will spend decades behind bars before he can even be considered for parole. The Manhattan District Attorney described Fahim as kind, generous, and empathetic, a person who positively impacted the world. That description matters, because in true crime, people often focus so much on the killer that the victim becomes secondary. But Fahim should not be remembered only for how he died. He should be remembered for how he lived. He was a son, a brother, a founder, a young entrepreneur, a man who believed technology could solve real problems, a man who built across borders, a man whose story inspired people in Bangladesh, Nigeria, and beyond. The sentence closed a legal chapter, but no courtroom can return what was taken. No verdict can give Fahim his future back. No sentence can erase the pain his family still carries. Fahim Saleh's legacy. Fahim's story is tragic, but it is not only tragedy. It is also a story of ambition, of building, of believing that the next big idea does not have to come from Silicon Valley. It can come from Bangladesh. It can grow in Nigeria. It can be built by someone young enough to be underestimated, but bold enough to try anyway. Pathao became part of Bangladesh's startup history. Gokada became part of Fahim's global vision. He saw problems and tried to solve them. That is why his death affected so many people. Bangladesh mourned him. Nigeria mourned him. The startup world mourned him. Because Fahim represented possibility. He represented the idea that young founders from immigrant families could build across borders. He represented a future that was still unfolding. And that is what makes the case even more painful. He was only 33. He was not at the end of his story. He was still building it. The dark lesson of the case The murder of Fahim Saleh leaves behind a dark lesson. Danger does not always look like danger. Sometimes danger looks like someone on your payroll, someone who smiles in meetings, someone who handles your schedule, someone who knows your habits, someone who has access to your money, someone you trusted enough to let inside your life. For founders, business owners, and anyone with people around them, this case is a warning. Trust matters, but trust without boundaries can become dangerous. Financial access needs control, private routines need protection, and second chances must be handled carefully. Fahim reportedly gave Haspel a chance to repay the money. That shows compassion, but compassion cannot always change someone who is already hiding a dangerous secret. Haspel had choices. He could confess, he could repay, he could face the consequences. Instead, prosecutors said, he chose to silence the person who knew the truth. And in trying to protect his fake life, he destroyed a real one. Final emotional buildup. Think about the contrast. This story began with a young founder, a man with ideas, a man with companies, a man building across continents, a man trying to bring technology into places where people needed solutions. And it ended in a Manhattan apartment building, an elevator, a mask, a stolen fortune, a trusted assistant, a second chance that turned into betrayal. It sounds like something written for a crime thriller, but this was not fiction. It was real. A real family lost someone. A real company lost its founder. A real future was cut short. Fahim's life should have been remembered for innovation, growth, and global impact. Instead, his name became attached to one of the most shocking betrayal murders in New York's recent history. And the reason is painfully simple: greed, fear, and a secret someone was willing to kill to protect. Closing narration. On July 13, 2020, Fahim Saleh walked into his building like it was any other day. He did not know that someone close to him had already made a decision to hide the theft, a decision to avoid consequences, a decision to turn trust into violence. By the time investigators uncovered the truth, the world had lost a young entrepreneur with so much left to build. Tyrese Haspel was eventually convicted and sentenced to 40 years to life. But the real tragedy is that none of this had to happen. The money could have been repaid. The truth could have been faced. The second chance could have been taken. Instead, fear took over, greed took over, betrayal took over. And Fahim Saleh lost his life in the very place where he should have been safest. This was the murder case of Fahim Saleh, the Pathao-linked founder, the creator of Gokada, and the young visionary whose life was cut short by someone inside his own circle. YouTube outro. If this story stayed with you, remember Fahim only as a victim. Remember him as a builder, a young entrepreneur who believed technology could change lives, a founder who built across countries, a person whose story was bigger than the crime that ended it. And if you want more true crime stories told with respect, depth, and facts, subscribe to the channel. Because behind every headline, there is a person. Behind every case, there is a family. And behind every crime, there is a truth that should never be forgotten.